Good morning, everyone. It'll just be a minute or two, and we'll get started. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sunnyvale Mayor Larry Klein. Happy Friday the 13th. Hopefully, there are no superstitious people out there. Welcome. This is the 35th installment of my weekly virtual office hours. People continue to say they appreciate these weekly live stream addresses, and hearing from their mayor. And I'll continue to do these while shelter in place continues and probably a lot longer. This Facebook live stream event is a great way for me to give you updates, answer some of your questions, and of course, provide some weekly words of encouragement. Thank you for allowing me to continue to represent you and work for Sunnyvale during ever-changing times. I hope everyone's doing well, staying healthy. Please remember to take care of yourself, both physically and mentally. These are difficult times for so many of us. Keep following the county health orders. We are still, in the orange tier, but easily on the verge of moving back into red. So do whatever you can to stop the spread of the virus. Continue to wash your hands. Don't touch your face. Reduce the number of people that you come in contact with on a daily basis. Maintain safe social distancing when you're out, and of course, wear your mask. It helps. It's mandatory, and the CDC issued a directive earlier this week that it does actually protect you. So as I've said before, if you need a face covering, please contact me. I still have people who donated lots of masks to me, so I'm ready to continue to hand those out. I'm still surprised seeing how many disposable masks I'm seeing on my morning runs through the neighborhood. So using a reusable face covering is one of the best things you can do. This week we've had a surge of cases, so if you could meet somebody, or you yourself could be asymptomatic, not showing any symptoms, and conceivably passing on the virus. So please be careful. Please wear your mask. Please get tested, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So we're now 242 days after the March 16th county health order started the whole shelter in place in an attempt to slow the spread of the virus. That's 2/3 of a year. So we're now, way more than halfway, and on our way closing into a year of shelter in place. Looking at as far as the vaccine availability, that will probably be just after a year after all this started. And since that declaration, a lot has happened. A lot happens every day. I have daily press conferences to watch, seminars to attend, conference calls to confer and advocate on your behalf. It's a lot of work, but I do think it's important to make sure that we're being represented locally and regionally during this pandemic. So let's talk a little bit about what's happened at the federal, state, county, and city level over the last week or so. So a week ago, city staff and council members got a tour of the AMC Theater, and the AMC Theater officially opened 2 weeks ago, and I've actually attended a movie already there, but that's everything has been safe, socially distanced. From a movie standpoint, they're not providing concessions. That's part of the county health order. And from my standpoint, it's actually very safe. Everyone was wearing their masks. There's plexiglass barriers between the ticket takers and you. And then when you actually reserve a seat, it's actually they reserve the seats on either side of you. So from that standpoint, it's a very safe. It was a very safe movie-going experience, and it was good to get behind the scenes and see the completed vision as far as what the movie projectors are and how they stream, how they cool everything. Let's see. Okay, uh, last Tuesday, of course, was election day, and thankfully everything went smoothly locally. There are no reports of electioneering or intimidation at the polls. Uh, Estimated that about 60 or more than 60% of California registered voters voted before election day. And let me run down some of the positions and measures a little bit later. First, I just want to thank everyone who supported my campaign, donated, walked precincts, tabled at the farmers market, put up lawn signs, or just got the word out. Your encouragement and appreciation really paid off, and and the feedback has been overwhelming. The voting is almost done, and at the local and state level. And from my standpoint, from a mayor standpoint, I'm leading with about 36% of the vote. Uh, I that's and right now there's about 95% of the estimated votes have been counted. It's not official, but I will be the first directly elected mayor for the next 4 years. So I'll continue to be your Sunnyvale mayor. So thank you for that opportunity. Thank you for supporting me. It's a little humbling at times, meeting people and hearing, the well wishes and people appreciating what I've done, as mayor. A lot of people who've lived in the community for 15, 20 years who never knew who their mayor is have really reached out and said, thank you for all you've done, especially during COVID. So, and I want to thank my two competitors. Vice Mayor Smith and Councilmember Goldman ran good campaigns. Focusing on the issues. We had a good dialogue from a campaign standpoint. Nancy called me last weekend to concede, and Councilmember Goldman actually did it during a council meeting earlier this week. That being said, conceding isn't really the final thing from the election. The election does need to be certified, and so the election will be certified within 30 days of election day. That's the county registrar is committed to that. And that includes any possible recounts that need to be done and all of that. So 2 weeks in, they will finish up, the majority of my guess is tonight or tomorrow, they will finish counting all the ballots. And then there will be a few races around the county where the election difference between different either elected between possible candidates, the margin of error is very, very small, and so that will kick off recounts for some of those votes. So we'll see what council recounts will need to be done around the county. As far as our races are concerned, the mayor's race has a wide margin. I've been staying around 1,200 to 1,300 votes ahead of my nearest competitor. As far as the district elections, in District 2, which is downtown, Elisa Cisneros won. In District 4, which is the southeast portion of the city, Russ Melton won. And then in District 6, Omar Din was the winner in that. So that's the north portion of the city. And so we'll have definitely 2 new council members in January. And then as far as the regional elections, I mentioned this last week, but it's become official over the last week. Our next county supervisor will be Otto Lee, who won with about 60% of the vote over Kansan Chu. So he'll take Dave Cortese's position. And then congratulations to our new state senator, that will be taking over Jerry Hill's spot, and that's Josh Becker. And then Mark Berman will be taking over, or was reelected as our state assembly member. And then from a congressional, federal standpoint, Ro Khanna was reelected as our Congress member. So, you know, several reelections, but several new people there that I'll be conferring with in the next few weeks. And then as for local propositions, Measure M, which was the Fremont Union High School District parcel tax, that passed with about 74% of the votes being in favor of that, and that was a parcel tax. And then Measure RR also passed, and that so that was the 1/8 1/8 cent sales tax increase for the three counties, San Francisco, San Mateo, and Santa Clara County. And that's estimated to bring in about $108 million a year annually for the next 30 years for Caltrain. And I think that's really good. You know, Caltrain is one of the best performing public transportation systems in the nation. And of course, during COVID, all of our transportation systems have had issues, but you know, this will allow them to have them have a permanent income stream. You know, that's one of the things that BART has. That most of the transportation systems have that, and so Caltrain hasn't up to this point, so that gives them some dedication as far as funding. It also is, as we move towards electrification, it makes it that much more important to be able to provide that capability of that financial a strong financial future as far as that's concerned. But so that's passed in San Francisco County with about 74%, San Mateo County above 71%, and Santa Clara County actually dropped below the 2/3 level. So we were running about 67%. We've now dropped to about 65.9%, but that means that the measure still passes, and that's an important thing. You know, the measure success or failure depended upon the collective vote total for all three counties. So it's not just whether or not, you know, San Mateo, Santa Clara, San Francisco all surpass that 66% requirement, but whether or not the sum total of the special district called the Peninsula Corridor Joint Powers Authority District, so that was all three counties, whether or not that actually passed. So because San Mateo and San Francisco are way above 70%, and we're right just below 66%, the Caltrain Measure RR will still be passing, and I think that's really important from a local level. And then another measure was Measure S, which was the Santa Clara Valley Water District parcel tax, and we've been re-upping that for many, many years. That passed with 75% of the voters in favor, so that's actually very positive. You know, having safe water and having that dependable for many, many years is critical from a county standpoint, and that parcel tax makes sure that water and that water supply is still there. From a state standpoint, we talked about most of the propositions last week, and so none of those really changed. One thing that did become final, or almost final at this point, but with the votes counting, the margin seems fairly large. Prop 15 did fail. So this was going to be an increase on taxes on commercial properties, and this was a citizen effort, basically a ballot measure signed with signatures that tried to do some change to Prop 13. And you know, Prop 13 has been kind of the third rail for many years as far as trying to make any changes to that. What this was going to do is do a split roll, focusing on, you know, commercial properties and reassessing them. From that standpoint, you know, it didn't pass. The state legislators could do a split rate and immediately increase the percentage on business properties, on commercial properties, as opposed to completely doing a reevaluation, which, in talking to our county assessor, Larry Stone, that would have caused, been a burden that he says would have almost been impossible. We would have increased the number of county assessors to quite a bit to do assessing and the number of around reassessing all the different commercial properties around the county. So from that standpoint, and then the number of complaints or challenges that went into place. So from that standpoint, it had positives that it would help fund our schools and our local communities. Hopefully, the state legislators will take this up in the coming session. And then from a national level, of course, last Saturday, the several news agencies called the race for Joe Biden, for our new president-elect. There's lawsuits going on, and it's still being, those lawsuits are being filed and going through court. So we'll see how this ends up. But maybe I'll finally get to meet the president, President Trump. And normally when presidents fly into Moffett Field, they invite the mayors of Mountain View and Sunnyvale to meet them on the tarmac. That being said, for the last 2 years, the president is visited, and we didn't get that invitation. So anyway, maybe I'll finally get to meet the next president when if things go the way they look from the way the news agencies go. And then on Monday and Tuesday of this week, Governor Newsom and Dr. Galley had a press conference, and the biggest thing was a big warning about the number of COVID-19 cases that are trending up in the state. And that was the big thing. That's not just seen here in the Bay Area, that's seen around the state, that there's been a general surge across the board, across everything. And a lot of this has to do with from a county standpoint, it looks like it's mainly the younger people that are doing this. So if things stay the way they are between this week and next week, the governor was saying that over half the California counties could move to a more restrictive tier. And so we've already had 11 counties this week move from whatever tier they were in backwards. So, we're currently in the orange tier, and if we don't keep our cases down, then conceivably we'll be moving back into the red tier, which would mean most likely that all indoor dining would end, reducing the indoor gatherings from a religious standpoint, cinemas possibly. So it has a big effect on our capability, and that was a big concern. But Santa Cruz County did move back this week from the orange tier to the purple tier. So there were quite a few counties across the state that went to a very more restrictive, either red to orange or orange to purple. San Francisco wasn't forced to move, but they actually are shutting down indoor restaurants on Friday. So they're taking kind of a step ahead, trying to make sure that they don't actually have to move back from a state standpoint. So making, a certain amount of effort prior to the state forcing that. And then on Tuesday, that afternoon, or Tuesday morning, County Health, Santa Clara County Health had a press conference, and they also reported a surge in positive test cases and an increase in hospitalizations over the last week. If we're not following safety protocols, we can easily fall back, to a more restrictive tier. If you find businesses that aren't following the safety protocols, they can be reported at sccovidconcerns.org, or you can call the advice line at 866-870-7725. And so that, that's a way to make sure, and county health officials won't go out and immediately find businesses, but they'll, remind them of what all the protocols are, make sure that they're in compliance, and figuring out how to best, even delivering additional sanitizer, signs for their windows, things of that nature to remind patrons that what they need to do, or just remind the restaurant owners. So that's important. The community continues to be our greatest, eyes and ears as far as COVID-19. And so if you have concerns, definitely report them, and we'll take a look, and the county will take a look. Surges between ages of 18 and 24 have been the big number of increase within the county, and of course most of the cases have been in East San Jose and Gilroy. So from that standpoint, the county is definitely focusing on testing there and making sure that raising the awareness among those communities. But there's been a lot of fatigue, and I think that's the big thing. There's concern. People are tired of sheltering in place, wearing their mask, and not being able to socially interact with other people. Please be safe. The county health raised a lot of concerns about the holidays. If you're going to meet with family and friends at the holidays, definitely do an outdoor gathering. So as much as possible, whatever you can do outdoors, always safer than indoors. And then if preferably only do it with the immediate family, or slightly, or however big your bubble is. Breaking those barriers only increases risks for everyone. So, and if we change tiers, county health was very very clear that they're evaluating and discussing it at a regional level on the timeliness and how quickly they would clamp down on additional restrictions. So do what you can, wear your mask, wash your hands, and get tested. It's actually one of the things that's kept us in the orange tier is the amount of testing that's been going on. And so, the county was in Murphy Park. If you need to get tested, go to sccfreetest.org. Getting tested every 2 weeks. Because we've been doing so much testing, the state does take that into consideration when it's evaluating what our numbers are. So we've had a general uptick in cases, but because we're testing so many people and testing, in East Bay, in South County, but around the county, because we're testing so many people, it's really made a difference and kept us from changing what tier we're actually in. So if you can get tested, it's good for you. It's to make sure that you haven't been exposed and you're not asymptomatic. But it's also very good from a county standpoint that it's helping out everyone. It's keeping us in the current tier that we are right now. On Tuesday, Santa Clara County supervisors met, and they had a lot of things that they went through. But one thing that they did do was extend the eviction moratorium for small businesses to March 31st, and so that was going to end on February 1st. So they gave an additional 2 months, and then past March 31st, small businesses have up to 6 months after the moratorium ends to pay back at least 50% of the past due rent, and then up to a year to pay back the full past due rent up until March 31st. So it's given some flexibility to those small businesses in our community. And then on Tuesday night, council met, and we didn't go past midnight for the first time in 2 meetings, but we had several things that we covered. We had a budget update, and this was continued from the previous 2 meetings. So we received our first quarterly update as far as the 2020-2021 budget. And so ultimately, it was pretty positive, from a transportation occupancy tax. We estimated conservatively, and it actually was better than what we expected. The end of the year last year, from a revenue standpoint, was very positive, and so we'll be dealing with the additional funds, several $1 million that we had at the end of last fiscal year, the 2019-2020 fiscal year. We also approved $1.9 million in CARES Act funding. And so that's very positive that we got from the state. So, that helps defer some of the costs that we've had during COVID-19. From a council standpoint, we also approved the art master plan, and I'm a big advocate for the arts, getting as much art into our community, getting young and old involved in the arts. I think is really good from a community standpoint. It does make it nurtures our community, it nurtures our culture. And so we approved the master plan for public art, which gave a multitude of things that for one thing, we could move forward with. We didn't have, a good master art plan. So, temporary sculptures, utility box painting, there are a lot of different things, a Sunnyvale art gallery. So there are a lot of different things that were proposed. And so, that kind of has been about a year and a half effort to come up with that master plan. So I was finally happy to see that approved by our council members. One of the other things that we did was we have an ordinance. So we amended the ordinance requiring public art for commercial and basically city construction, and most importantly is from a public art standpoint. Up until this point, we had 1%. So 1% of the commercial building cost, 1% has to be set aside for art. So comparable. So however many millions of dollars it would take to build a specific commercial building, we would then force the developer to set aside a similar amount, 1%, for art. And what we did on Tuesday night was increase that art requirement from 1% to 2%, and then we also gave developers a possibility to do an in lieu fee instead of a 2%. So if they want to support, Sunnyvale art, they can do 1.1% and contribute that to the city. And most developers up to this point have actually went way beyond the 1%. So it's either 1.5, 2%, sometimes as much as 3% of the cost of the development was put towards the art at that site. But this actually helps fund, the city in the long term to make sure that we can do ongoing art programs. So for new development, if they don't want to put art on their site, they can then fund 1.1% of that project cost into the city to make sure, or if they don't go use the full 2%, they can defer or put a portion of that to go back to the city for our art programs. And we had a lot of possible art programs that could be funded with that in lieu program. But we also, from an art master plan standpoint, we also allocated $50,000 for a public art fund from that public art fund to implement as a utility art project. So a utility box art project. So a lot of the other cities around us have already implemented that. So the utility boxes on sidewalks in different locations around the city are either covered or covered with a plastic cover that's been designed by artists, or painted, and this could be community groups, this could be the Sunnyvale Art Club. So we funded that program, and that'll probably be kicked off sometime next year. So you'll start seeing a lot more art kind of spread throughout the city. So that's really important from my standpoint, that we'll have a lot more art in our community, which I think is really good for everyone. Next, I wanted to announce some of the upcoming events. So for next Tuesday, so we have another council meeting next week with several things on the agenda. It's a little bit lighter. As we get to the holidays, we try to keep the agendas a little bit lighter, but by city charter, we actually have to have 2 council meetings a month. So one of which is, one item that we have is authorize the city manager to sign a funding agreement with VTA for the Peary Parks Ride shuttle program, and approve a budget modification for about $500,000. So in 2016, the city and VTA basically were awarded $1.1 million in grant funding from MTC, so the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, to look at, and that was for climate initiatives, for parking management and transportation demand management. And the Peary Park program has been talked about for several years. We were trying to get a certain amount of momentum within Peary Park from a business standpoint behind it, so that, and as we start opening up next year, that's when, it's trying to get people to use public transportation from a Caltrain standpoint. It was free for all the businesses, so all the employees going into Peary Park from like the Caltrain station in the mornings. And the other thing that it would do is during off hours, it would actually be for residents that are within a certain area, and it's kind of one step towards a citywide shuttle. So how it was envisioned was the businesses in Peary Park and their employees would get priority during the rush hour, so in the morning and in the evening, and then on off hours or when it's not being used, residents would actually have a capability of doing an on-call service at a nearby intersection or something of that nature. And that would be between the areas between 101 and El Camino, and of course Mary and I think Fair Oaks. And so from that area, any residents within that area would be covered, and that would of course also take care of Peary Park. So from that standpoint, I think it's a great idea. It gets people out of their cars, and that's been one of the big things in my one of my main focuses has been trying to get people out of their cars and making active transportation. So we improved our active transportation plan over the summer, trying to make it safer for pedestrians, for bicyclists within our city. We'll be dealing with a lot of those, funding those programs and those different projects next year. But this is one thing that we can do to say, if you don't feel safe driving walking or biking, conceivably this also allows you to get a city-supported shuttle. So to me, that's one of the big things, and I think from a benefits, it will be really important going forward to our citizens to have that alternative. One of the other things what we'll be seeing on Tuesday is approving 2 new office buildings on Ross Drive. And so Ross Drive is that little triangle where 101, 237, and Matilda. So it's that triangle of small business park between that area, and ultimately it's a new, and that's right near the county shelter on Hamlin, if you know what the county shelter is. But it's 2 new office buildings. I haven't went through what that design looks like yet, but it was recently approved by the Planning Commission. And so the other thing we'll be doing is considering a 3-month pilot program to stream council meetings on Facebook Live. And for all you people who enjoy watching me on Facebook Live, we'll see how the council meeting Facebook Live go. So we're already streaming on YouTube. We stream on the local cable access channel, but for that standpoint, let's go ahead and so this is taking a look at what it would do to our social media, what kind of response we get from that standpoint, and figuring out, do people actually enjoy it? It does take a lot of effort, not that much to set up, but whether or not we would turn off comments on this, because we're not going to be actively responding to feedback during a meeting. So there's a lot of questions whether or not how you deal with social media in today's age is sometimes very difficult. So we'll see how the staff report goes, but that's one of the things that we'll be looking at. We'll also upcoming things on the Lakewood Branch Library, Fremont Union High School District. We'll see an info report on where the final design for the Lakewood Branch Library stands. They'll see it on November 17th in a joint meeting with the Sunnyvale Board of Library Trustees and the Parks and Recreation Commission. We'll see it on November 18th. The Sunnyvale School District will see it on November 19th, and City Council is scheduled to see it December 8th. So if council approves that conceptual plan, the team will then continue the design development in preparation for a bid and the construction document. So happy to see that the Lakewood Library is moving forward after all these years. There's been a lot of good outreach meetings this week or this year, even during COVID, and I've been happy to take part in those and happy to see, what kind of response people have been giving. I think it's worked out very well from that standpoint that people have shown, a lot of interest in walking precincts in the Lakewood area. It was actually very good. I actually met with did a quick update on a Friday morning at Lakewood Elementary last month, just to kind of give an update on where everything stands. But this is fantastic. Happy to see that branch library and that branch library not just as a city function, but as a partnership between the Sunnyvale School District and the Fremont Union School District to create a community center and an area where residents in the Lakewood neighborhood have a place to access computers, to have 3D printing, to have books and places to congregate. I think it'll be very positive for that community. Let's see. And then as far as Moffett Park, oh yeah, so we talked about this last week. Moffett Park, we're starting a series of several meetings. And so the first one will be November 30th, but these meetings will be 2 hours, and so it's a slightly change, as opposed to a study session, which people give comments but can't really interact with city staff. It'll be about 2 hours of comments and interacting with city staff, as much like the Lakewood Branch Library was, and then it will be a study session by City Council, so they will then give feedback to city staff. So there will be 3 different outreach meetings coming up, and the first one is November 30th, and that one will be focused on sea level rise and urban ecology. So that will be from 4 to 7 p.m. on November 30th, with the last hour being the council study session. The second one would be transportation and infrastructure on December 10th from 4 to 7. And then the third one would be land use, housing, and open space on February 1st. So I'll remind you about those as we move forward, but those have, a little more time before they actually occur. Let's go ahead and get to our county health dashboard. Let's talk about testing and state and hospitalization from a county in a state standpoint. From a state standpoint, we just finished and passed 1 million cases. So we've had about 18,000 deaths, but this is here for a long time. That's a big milestone from reaching 1 million cases. Texas was the first state to surpass 1 million. Now we're the second one, and so whatever we can do to slow that is critical. Things are looking a little iffy from a county standpoint. Cases continue to go up from a county standpoint. We have 27,299 cases. That's up about 1,800 cases from last year, 1,600 cases from last week, and that was after several weeks of 1,000 cases. So we've seen a general uptick from 800 to 900, several weeks of 1,000. We're now at 1,600 cases week over week, and so definitely that trend is not a good trend for the county. We're at 440 deaths. We've had 26 new deaths in the last week, so it's definitely still affecting people and actually increasing. So COVID-19 is here for a while. We currently have 102 hospitalizations, so we're over the 100 people hospitalized mark. It's about the same as last week, which was at 99, but that had been a general uptick over 80s, 90s, and now over 100. So it is very, very dangerous out there. San Jose, especially because of East Bay, had a big increase. They increased about 1,100 test cases, or 1,100 COVID cases since last week, which brought them up to about 18,057. And Sunnyvale went up about 50 from last week to 1,185, which is about the same as we've had for the last few weeks, 30s, 40s, 50s. So we're about the same, but still, generally, we have increased that threshold. That level has increased over the last few weeks. I continue to do a lot of advocating on your behalf. At the county level, we have lots of discussions with the county health and county supervisors. We have the pop-up van coming to Sunnyvale the second and fourth Mondays for the time being. They were here this past Monday, and if you need to get tested, and they'll be back on November 23rd, so the Monday of Thanksgiving week. So if you need to get tested, please go get tested. You can find out more information at secfreetest.org. That's secfreetest.org. And El Camino Hospital actually did testing downtown on Tuesday of this week, but if you want to go there, they are doing free testing for people who live, work, go to school in their district. And so all you need to do is contact El Camino Hospital and you can get tested there. So there's lots of options if you need to get tested. It's really important from our standpoint that it's made a difference from our numbers from a county standpoint. So if you want to get tested, please go get tested. If you think you might have been exposed, it's only positive from a county standpoint. Several questions. Dale asked, why does voting take so long? And I talked to the county registrar last week. So Shannon Bushy is our county registrar, and it does take a long time. The big thing is the positive thing is we didn't have as many mail-in votes this election cycle as we normally do, but we had about 650,000 ballots to count for the county. That's about 64% of the registered voters. So that's actually very positive. We've got an uptick in voting this election, but as of a week ago, so at a week into, or last Saturday, they still had about 200,000 votes to count. So they counted about 2/3, and every day they continue to count more ballots. They had about 173,000 vote by mail ballots, and they were going to be accepting ballots for 17 days after Election Day. But the word really did get out that people needed to vote early this year, and so as many votes by mail that they had been able to collect prior to a few days before Election Day, and then all the ballots that were all the in-person voting that happened on Election Day was counted election night. So that was how we got our initial vote totals, which was an estimated about 52% of all the votes being totaled that election night. And so, but because people voted, a lot of people turned in their ballots in the last day or two or on Election Day. And so it takes a while for them to open up all those ballots, make sure that they confirm all the signatures, and then actually count all those. So they're at about 95% now. And this is, I talked to Supervisor Smidian, and they've actually improved quite a bit over the last few years. So about 10 years ago, they had a lot of issues and put a lot of money into increasing staffing, improving equipment. I asked the registrar, could they go faster? Yes, they would, but they would need a bigger building, more people, more equipment, and getting them done, getting all the votes counted within 2 weeks, and then having time for possible recounts is a positive thing. Because people voted early, actually, because most vote by mail ballots were turned in early, uh, usually we get, so in our last election, our last presidential election, or actually just the primary election, we had about 30 to 40,000 votes come in the 3 days after the election day. But so many people had turned them in earlier that we didn't get that many votes this time. So on election day, we received about 6,000 about 6,000 votes, or 6,000 mail-in ballots that went through the postal service. Then we received about 1,300 the day after, and on the third day, or the second day after election day, we only received about 187 vote by mail ballots. So we received, a handful afterwards. So, but less than 8,000 ballots were received by mail in the 3 days after election day, as opposed to 30 or 40,000. But that's still a big effort to count all the different ballots to make sure all the signatures match the names on record. And then there's basically clearing the ballots. So cleaning any issues that were there. If people forgot to sign, having them come down and do an affidavit, or making sure that signatures are correct. All those sorts of things go through what is one of the things that the county registrar's office does do in reaching out and making sure that the people who voted are actually the right people, making sure the signatures match, everything works out. So it takes a while, not a quick task, and I would definitely like it to go faster, but it's how much money the county is going to spend on voting centers, new equipment, personnel, all of that. Okay, some other questions that I got. So there's a question. I missed the art rules. How do folks apply to share their art around Sunnyvale? So right now, the details for the art box, utility box art program haven't been finalized. So they're definitely working on that, and ultimately that program and the definition for that program will come out next year. So that's one of the things that can be done and will be done. There are other programs like the temporary art program that we've talked about. Right now that's only being done by city staff, like the murals that were done at last year's State of the City. You can find them on Murphy Avenue right now. But the staff is definitely looking at how to do temporary art around the city. So I think that's really important. Who is our District 1 representative on the City Council? So District 1, so this is the interesting thing as we transition between 7 at-large people, where up until this election, 7 council members represented the entire city, were all elected by the entire city. So moving to districts, and so what happened with the March ballot with Measure B passing, split the city into 6 districts, and then also had, of course, the directly elected mayor, which I will be the first directly elected mayor. So District 1 is the the southwest corner of the city is District 1. District 2 is the downtown area. District 3 is South Central. District 4 is South East, and District 5 is the Snail neighborhood, so it's between downtown and 101, Snail and San Miguel, and District 6 is kind of the north part of Sunnyvale, north of 101. And so for districts 1, 3, and 5, they won't get to vote for their council member until 2022. So we have one more round of district elections to happen. That being said, for the next 2 years, you'll have, for the people in districts 2, 4, and 6, they'll have a directly elected district representative. And then there will also be 3 at-large positions. So the three at-large positions currently are Councilmember Hendricks, Councilmember Larson, and Councilmember Fong, and then of course the directly elected mayor. So there are those at-large positions, the mayor and the new district directly elected mayor, and then the three previous at-large positions that were elected in 2018 will continue to represent the entire city. So people do have a little bit of time to have additional representation. In 2 years from now, people will have the member in their district, whoever is elected in 2022, so beginning of 2023, and the mayor as the representative. So everyone will at least have two directly elected representatives that they have voted for. So I think that's very, very positive. How often should we get tested? So at least once a month is what the county is currently representing, is suggesting, especially if you're out. If you're a healthcare worker, every 2 weeks, I think, is the suggested number. So if you're a frontline worker, if you're working in restaurants, the sooner you find out that you've been affected, the better. If you're getting, and the issue, of course, is it's this disease, this virus is very insidious. It can spread through the air. It's not very likely, but it can. And so, it can conceivably be contact, although, this is the big thing, walking through a crowd, if everyone's masked, it shouldn't happen, but there, this is the ongoing question of how transmissible this disease is. So it's good for you and for your safe state of mind to some degree, to prove out that you are safe, and you don't have COVID, and it also helps out the county as a whole. So whatever you can do, getting into a regular cycle of getting tested is better for everyone at the end of the day. When the county health van comes to Murphy Park, it's all by appointment. You can do drop-in also. They usually have a little bit of extra capacity, but it's all by appointment. It's very easy. You're in and out in 5 minutes. It's good for you. It's also good for the county. And I think that is almost all the questions. Let me go through anything final. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. We're almost to 10 o'clock, so I will go ahead and start wrapping up. Thanks for again joining me this week. It's as always. I'm proud of Sunnyvale's response to the pandemic. I know this continues to be difficult. There's a lot of fatigue. New issues come up every week, but your response is critical, and it does make a difference. Help your neighbors. Share baked goods. Write positive chalk messages. Put positive messages in your window. Continue to build our community and help others however you can, especially during these difficult times. I'm proud of Sunnyvale residents pulling together, helping their neighbors, helping strangers. If you're out on a walk, wave, say hello from a safe distance. People really miss that social interaction. The fatigue of sheltering in place is really affecting people, and they want to, break their bubbles. That being said, that's the easiest way to spread the disease. So, I think do what you can. Please wear your mask. Sunnyvale will emerge from this as a stronger community. We're in this together. We will get through this together. Thanks for listening. And until next week, stay safe, stay warm, wear your mask, get tested if you can. And of course, have a good day, have a good weekend. See you. Take care. Goodbye.